Hi, this is Jeremy for xrmdevs.com. In this video, I'm going to walk through the process of debugging your code on Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online. So let's go on to create an account. I'm just going to call this account Account 1. I'm going to go ahead and save that. If I view the account, take a look at the notes, there's nothing there. So what I want to do is attach a note every time an account is created, but I want to deliberately throw an exception so we can debug the plugin and see what's going on. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio 2015. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call this project Plugins, and I'm using the .NET Framework 4.5.2. Once this loads, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rename this to something more meaningful, something like Account Create Plugin. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my references. So we're going to add our references to the Microsoft.xrm.sdk DLL, which is in the bin of the SDK you downloaded earlier. I'm going to also add the system.runtime.serialization reference from the .NET Framework. Okay, so now we need to sign our key. So we need to sign the assembly with a new key. So I'm just going to create a new key. I'm going to call it Plugins. I'm not going to bother protecting it and just click OK. So now that that's done, let's just implement the iPlugin interface, like so. We need to obtain a reference to the execution context. So to do that, we're going to call the getService method of the service provider factory, and we're going to get an instance of our execution plugin. Then we're going to interrogate that context, the input parameters. We're going to check that the input parameters contain a target and that the target is in fact an entity, because it can be an entity reference. So we need to make sure that it's an entity. If it is, I'm going to go ahead and create a new note, which is the annotation entity name. I'm going to set the subject to creation information. I'm going to set the object ID to an entity reference, which is going to be the account ID, which will come from the output parameters. So when the account is created, essentially, the output parameters will contain the ID of that account that's created. So I'm going to use that to set the entity reference to the note. I'm going to set the text to, this account was created at, and then I'm just going to specify a time when it was created. Now notice the attribute name note.txt, so I deliberately spelt it incorrectly. So this is where the exception is going to be thrown. Then what I need to do is get an instance of my organization service factory, and from that we can get an instance of our organization service, which is the main service that we're going to use to execute against the platform. And then once that's done, finally I'm going to call the create method of the organization service, and it's going to go ahead and create the note. Okay, so let's build that, minimize it. I'm going to go ahead and go into our plugin registration tool and execute that. I'm going to create a new connection. I already have the connection string saved, so I'm just going to log in directly. Okay, so once it's loaded, I'm going to register my assembly. So I'm going to point to the assembly that I've just built in the plugins project. So it's bin debug folder. I'm going to register the selected assembly. Once that's done, I'm going to register a new step on that assembly. It's going to be for the create message of the account entity. There's no secondary entity. Post-operation synchronous is fine. I'm going to register the new step. So that's done. That's registered. That plugin is now registered. So if I go into CRM now and I go to create an account, I'm going to call this account 2. I'm going to hit save. Now it throws an exception, query builder exception. So it doesn't really give me much information outside of that. So what I want to go ahead and do is I want to install the online profiler. And what this profiler is going to do is it's going to profile the plugin that you target, and it's going to capture information about the context, about everything regarding that plugin that we're going to target. So we're going to target the account create plugin. I'm going to target for exceptions, and I'm going to deselect include secure configuration because we don't need it. So now you'll see that the account create plugin is now being profiled. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and try to create this account again online. So I'm going to call it account 2 again. And this time, when I click save, it's going to throw a business process error. Download the details and load with the plugin profiler. So I'm going to download them, and I'm just going to save the error details, which is the default name, to my desktop. So I'm just going to back out of that. Okay. So now I am going to replay the plugin. So I'm going to replay the plugin execution that we just profiled. So let's point to the error details file for the profile. I'm going to plug in the assembly location that we've used. And take note here, attach Visual Studio to the plugin registration process. So you're going to need to attach to this process ID. So I'm going to go to Debug, attach to process, and then I'm going to search for the plugin registration tool, which is right there, 18792. So I'm going to attach to that. What's going to happen now is it's going to start Visual Studio in debug mode, and it's going to allow us to debug through the plugin. So I'm going to start the execution. Essentially, you're playing back what we've just done online. So now we can actually step through and debug our code. So let's go through it, and here's where we should get our exception once we create. So I'm going to go ahead and create, and then there it is. So additional information, annotation entity doesn't contain attribute with the name note.txt. So that was the attribute name that I told you before. I was deliberately going to misspell to throw the exception, and that's exactly what has happened. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to spell it correctly. Rebuild the project now. Once I've rebuilt the project, we need to update the assembly that's online. So I'm going to basically go to the account create plugin again, and I'm going to point to the same assembly on my desktop, the plugins DLL, and I'm going to update it. So now the plugin has been updated with the correct code. So what you'll find now is if I go back to CRM Online and I create my account 2, click save, this time it saves successfully. So when I view the record, I can take a look at it, and when I check the note, you'll see that the note has been attached. So this is essentially how we debug our plugins online.